With us today, as you bring us both up, we have Khary Penebaker from Wisconsin's 5th District. He is running a very tough race in a district which was the only district that was carried by John McCain in '08 and was carried by Bush before him. So, Mr. Khary Penebaker, welcome to the virgin sailing of the Project Sanity show, and thank you so much for joining us here.
Thanks for having me.
So why don't you tell our audience a bit about you, how you got into politics, and what you want to do with your candidacy?
Sure. So I had spent the last 3 years roughly, advocating for common sense gun reform with Moms Demand Action and Every Town for Gun Safety in America. And I had, in that capacity, had met hundreds of gun violence survivors. I mean, hundreds. And it got to the point where I'm talking to folks, asking them to march with me, whether it's here in Wisconsin or the South Side of Chicago. Whether hey, call your senator, call your state senator, call your federal senator, call your Congress people. Keep at it, and asking people to be engaged and to do things. And it got to the point where I started to ask myself, how much more am I willing to ask of myself? I mean, I'm asking folks to do these things. How much more can I do? And you get to a point where you realize that you're in some ways begging a politician to do something. Mm-hmm. And after a while, it becomes pretty clear that they'll say things to you in private, and then in public they'll vote or say things completely opposite of what they just told you. Yeah. So I determined that in order for me to make the kind of change that I believe in, I wanted to become a part of the solution myself and actually become an elected official, so that I can be a part of the process of making. Bringing about common sense gun reform. So that was the impetus for me wanting to do it. I'm a father of 3. I've lived in Wisconsin the majority of my life. I got a daughter that's 17, a son that's 8, and a little one that is 3, who's got a personality that is quite amazing. But I've been politically active for the most part for a number of years now. And I'm pretty fed up with the way things have been going, and I just want to make a difference. And I believe that the positions that I stand for are such that people will come on board and help make this come about.
So what is your experience? When you walk around talking about gun legislation, what is your experience? We keep hearing about there being 75% of America is for common sense gun legislation, but the politicians, the NRA, they just keep not wanting to enact anything. Is that your experience as well?
Oh, absolutely. So right now, over 90% of America supports universal background checks. More than 80% of Republicans support universal background checks. And more than 70% of gun owners support background checks. So what that tells you is you have a broad swath of people in a bipartisan fashion who support common sense gun legislation. The problem is that you have a Congress who isn't willing to do so or doesn't have the spine to do so because they're afraid of the gun lobby. So when the gun lobby is able to spend obscene amounts of money and make these Congress people afraid of what they're going to do, make them afraid of some primary or something like that. They'll find any way to get out of doing something that the public is demanding that gets done. If you look at 2013, we had a good chance of the Manchin-Toomey bill, but even in that case, it wasn't the bill by far. It was not perfect, but it was a good step in the right direction, but was unable to reach the number of votes that it needed to pass. And that's a function of a spineless Congress.
Okay, so what is, in your mind, what is the solution to gun control? You have the Second Amendment, you have freedom of expression, you have the free market. What is the solution that allows these things to exist alongside people being safe?
Sure. So I want to make sure that we're clear, though. There is not one solution. It's going to take a multitude of things that come together to reduce gun violence. I don't believe we're ever going to eliminate gun violence and take that 91 gun deaths per day to 0. I don't think that is a feasible thing. It's a goal to work towards, absolutely, but it's not something that's going to be. I don't think that's ever going to be achievable. Just like no other law is going to be that kind of perfect. But at the same time, the first thing we need to do is enact universal background checks. That's the most comprehensive way of reducing gun violence. There's some other things that we can do to start looking at the segments of gun violence. For example, enacting waiting periods before you buy a gun, because that will help with crimes of passion and with suicide. So in my case, my mother committed suicide with a gun. Mm-hmm. If you place a barrier between a person who may be in the fit of rage from a crime of passion, or maybe mentally unstable, because the majority of suicides are impulsive, if you can place a barrier in between those instances, you can help save some folks' lives. So those are just two of the ways that you can help make a real and substantive impact on reducing gun violence.
Okay, so let me just play devil's advocate here. So Fox News would immediately say, well, people can also murder other people with an axe or with a knife, and you can take many pills, and there are other ways to do these things. So why do we not have axe control? So
I mean,
just an even response. Like,
the fact that you laugh as you say that just shows how ridiculous that argument actually is. But when you look at the states that have universal background checks, you have 48% fewer gun suicides, you have 46% fewer women that are shot and killed by a former or current intimate partner, and you have 48% fewer police officers that are shot and killed. Those are real, tangible numbers that show this kind of legislation can actually work. When folks bring up arguments about, well, what about rope, what about pills, what about axes and all that, well, all they're trying to do is deflect away from the argument so we don't have to talk about it. Okay. They have no interest in actually wanting to solve the problem, because I think some people are of the mindset that we need to have guns for everybody all the time, no matter what. And I mean, I don't think any reasonable person, including the majority of gun owners, actually believe that.
No. That has been the experience I have had as I've traveled along the Bernie Sanders campaign, is finding more and more gun owners who keep saying, I don't care. Let's have some. He's not coming for my guns. Obama is not coming for my guns. Bernie is not. Can we please just agree not to have it be the OK Corral in the streets of America?
Sorry, I didn't plan on hopping in here, but start more. Khary, if I could just real quickly. I happen to actually be a gun owner, so I felt obliged to opine on this particular part, and that I think you guys are totally right in that I may be a more liberal of my shooting friends when I go out or whatever. I shoot for hobby and a bit of sport, and so like mostly just clay though, and so. It's registration, or not so much. I mean, there's some craziness around registration, but particularly around making sure that people some times and background checks, universal background checks, that we all agree on. Even the most far right leaning of my friends that in that crowd, we all agree on that. So it is astonishing to me that we can see how unable we are to make that change despite its resounding support.
Right. So, right. And in my case, so I don't, I no longer own a gun, but I do have a concealed carry permit that I got in 2012. Excuse me. So I mean, and I respect the Second Amendment. I absolutely do. But that doesn't mean that it's without some level of making sure that we can keep folks safe without saying, hey, everybody needs to have a gun all the time without any kind of background check. That doesn't make our communities safer. And I think that's what folks are demanding, that we find ways, not only find ways to make our community safer, but find ways to do it together. And you know, when I talk about gun violence prevention, I don't do it in a way to try to demonize those who may be deemed my opposition. We need a clear path on solving this problem, and it's going to require non-gun owners, gun owners, hunters, sportsmen, Democrats, Republicans, I mean, everybody to come together. And you can, as I stated, you know, when you have more than 90% of Americans wanting it so far, I mean, The fact that we haven't is to me, damn near a crime. But I mean, if we fail to listen to each other and want to engage in just simply yelling at each other rather than solving the problem, more people will die. And I'm not okay with that.
Okay, so let me see if I can get you into a little bit of hot water by burrowing a little bit deeper on the Second Amendment here. So back in the 18th century, the Second Amendment was interpreted by the United States Supreme Court as being focused on the two words "to keep" and "bear arms," where they said to bear arms is a term at the time used in Navy situations, and thus they interpreted on that word as being something only to have to do with militias and organized militias. It wasn't until the early 1900s that a new United States Supreme Court ruled where they put the emphasis on the word "keep" arms. So my question to you is, should we throw caution to the wind and say, no, we need a complete change in our discourse? We need to talk about what the Second Amendment actually means and intends.
So, in all reality, though, despite those Supreme Court changes or interpretations, the majority of the time our country's been in existence, they didn't view guns the way that we currently do. That change began to happen in the 70s. But beyond that, I'm not of the position that where I want to see the Second Amendment overturned or really changed at all. The interpretation is something we can talk about, but I'm not at all interested in trying to drag the country down a road where we are going to fight about whether we keep or do we repeal the Second Amendment. And as far as I'm concerned, it's in the Constitution. I respect it as such. Now, what do we do to make sure we have a society that can work within the constraints of having that amendment and wanting to make our community safe? That's what's important to me.
Okay. That sounds like a very nuanced approach.
Right.
You know that you're going into politics, right?
Yes, I do. But look, man, I'm a father, right? And I'm a man who has to live every day as a gun violence survivor, and I've hugged hundreds and hundreds of fellow gun violence survivors, and it requires me to be able to look beyond just pure ideology. What can we achieve, and what's going to make the most sense? I mean, I can't just sit here and have these just some idea that I can't convince someone else it makes sense to do. I got to be willing to listen. I got to be willing to hear what I don't even like calling him an opponent, but I got to hear what a opponent might say so we can come to an agreement of what's the best way to solve this problem. Because the longer I argue with someone on what we should or shouldn't do, or how we interpret this or how we interpret that, there are going to be 91 people that die every single day. The longer we wait to fix it, the more people will die. And that is simply not acceptable to me. I'm not willing to do that.
Okay. So on your webpage, you have 3 issues, overall subject issues, and under those issues you have a rough outline on some very targeted things. Are these things that you feel like are very heated in the district that you're running in, or is this simply things that you care more about than other things?
So one of the first things we did after we announced was actually went out and talked to people and find out what matters to them. Now, what matters to me may not always jive with the way the district is going to function. So that's why we didn't have an issues page on our website for the longest time, because look, I can't just say, hey, I'm going to run on this one issue and then I'm going to beat it till the cows come home. I got to talk to folks. I got to talk to voters, people who I need to get to vote for me. What matters to you? And ultimately what I found is public safety, making sure college is more affordable, and making sure that we can do things to create job opportunities for folks. Those are the things that I heard over and over and over. Now, we would hear sporadically from other people different aspects of what Congress has to deal with, whether it's foreign policy or other issues like that. And those issues are important, but the 3 things that I have highlighted on my website are the three things that I heard consistently every time I talk to people. But having said that, we will be adding positions later on other topics as the campaign progresses forward. But again, my campaign has only been in existence for 3 months now. So, but again, those are the three main things I've been hearing.
Okay, so we have a viewer. We have a constant engagement from the viewership. That's one of the reasons why we're on YouTube. We have a viewer who wants to know what your view on the Sandy Hook family lawsuit is. And I would tack on to that, what is your view of the use of Sandy Hook in the Democratic primary so far?
So I definitely support the Sandy Hook families and their effort to bring about this lawsuit, because it centers around how AR-15 rifles are marketed to the public, and I support their effort to do that. And I believe as it is a fundamental American right to have your day in court. Now that doesn't mean they should win or that they're going to win. I believe it is a fundamental American right to have your day in court, and then you allow the court, the jury, and the judge to decide what happens from there. And as far as I am concerned, I believe it is important that this issue is at the forefront of the national discussion right now. That is amazingly important as far as I'm concerned. Now, some folks may think, hey, it's a political football or someone's using it for their own advantage. And personally, I literally do not care. I'm glad the issue is at the forefront of the conversation, and that people who have been through a living nightmare. So Erica Smigelski, who is a dear friend of mine, I know her personally in real life. We have literally cried together. Our mothers, we lost both of our mothers due to gun violence. So she and I have a special bond that I wish no one else would have to share with us, but we do. And so I'm glad that she gets to talk about her story and her mother Dawn's story at the national level, because it's important that people see the faces of gun violence. People need to understand that you can't just talk about this issue in the abstract. I mean, people who aren't affected directly by gun violence can talk about these things from an ideological perspective, but unless you have been in it, like Erica and I have, it means something different. So to have it being talked about at the level that it is right now, that's what's important to me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's leave the gun topic behind. I think you've answered very thoroughly and very nuanced on it. I'm very happy about that.
Thanks,
so let's move on to, you talk about business and business incentives to provide incentives for small businesses to be able to flourish.
Yes.
So is there a reason why it's small, maybe even medium-sized businesses you want to target?
Oh, absolutely. Because when you look at a small business, those small business owners are the folks that live in your community. Those are the people that you're going to see at the grocery store on Sunday or at church. So it's important to me to want to have a way to incentivize that small business community to want to create opportunities. For one of the things I talk about the most is the small business tax incentive to incentivize the small business community to hire prior felons, so that you can reduce recidivism rates to get some folks back to work. And to me, it is a way to have a person who's had some mistakes in his or her life find a way to integrate back into society and become a productive member of their community again. That is an important thing. But we can't, I don't expect a business, a for-profit business, to do something that's altruistic. They have a profit motive. So I'm looking at a way to combine that profit motive with my desire to want to create opportunity, especially for those who aren't going to get a fair shake now that they've served their debt to society. They want to move forward and do the right thing. But if you look at this just from a moral perspective, I mean, if you can find ways to help a family, right? Think about a child who hasn't seen their parent for a number of years because they've been incarcerated. Now they've come back, and if that parent is always going to be down on their luck, they're going to start engaging in crimes of survival. They're going to find a way to eat. They're going to find a way to put clothes on their back. And if we can't mitigate that difference, I mean, we're never going to solve the problem. And if you can, though, get some folks back to work, those children are going to look up to their parent now that their father or their mom are doing some good things for themselves and feeling more involved, and their self-esteem is back. That is a overwhelming sense of what it means to have redemption, and I think that is important.
So you touched on self-esteem. That this is one of the issues that I really have a stick to beat a dead horse with. Is not just here in America, but unfortunately also in Europe, where I'm from. Mm-hmm. There is a tendency within the bureaucracies of the governments to strip people of dignity. We can't give you welfare so that you can make it until your next job without having you pee in a cup, and you have to work for a pittance 5 hours away from your home, and if you don't, then you get no more. And oh, your son, he was involved in criminal activity, you can now no longer be in federal housing. You're all a bit like, it seems like stripping people of dignity is a thing we just do without thinking about it anymore. So to give a former felon, or to give a person who's just down on his luck, the ability to straighten the back. Now, work is one way to do that. Are there other ways that you see that we can do that?
I'm sure there have to be, but I think when you look at this proposal, though, and I do believe you're right. I think, by and large, we have a group of people who are in control of our segments of our government, at least, who are in some ways hell-bent on trying to demoralize a segment of our population, and they have done a phenomenal job of doing that. But as long as that cycle continues, as long as we allow those folks to remain in power, we aren't going to be able to stop that kind of process from occurring. When you make people feel that they're less than, that it is okay to cast them aside, how can you be shocked when you have the kind of crime rates and gun homicide rates that we have? How can you, why is this now all of a sudden like, oh my God, we have all this crime? But look at the way we treat people, right? Look at the way we in a lot of ways demonize folks. That is just simply not okay. But until we move past or at least get the people out of the positions of power to do those kinds of things, it's going to continue. But this is why, this issue with this tax incentive to hire prior felons is so important to me, because we can mitigate that difference and put some folks back to work and try to help those communities rebuild together, rebuild some families, and really do some good things with it.
Okay, so let's say you get your tax incentive passed through. Now there are some people crying out for something similar happening for people on welfare. Now, how do you prevent that sort of good intention to become the same legislation as the Welfare to Work program?
So what I can tell you is that there are, as far as I'm concerned, there have been some smaller local level tax credits that allowed for a company like mine, for example, to hire folks who are disadvantaged in one way or the other, hadn't had a chance to work in a number of months or a year or something like that. You put them back to work, they get a tax incentive, or I would get a tax incentive for doing so. So I know it actually works. I mean, you're not going to have any program that you're gonna find that someone isn't trying to manipulate or abuse it in one way or the other. That's inevitable in everything that happens within human nature. I mean, you have some folks who are just not, in my mind, they're not quality people in that way. They just want to abuse something, and that's in dealing with this kind of thing. You're going to have to talk to folks to find ways to put as many safeguards in place to prevent that as you can. But I'm not naive to think that that's not going to come up. But in part of what I'm going to do is talk to as many people as I can to try to cover as many bases as possible. But again, it's not going to be foolproof. No law is going to be foolproof. But the more people we can bring to the table and have these kind of conversations, the more good we can provide.
Okay, so what I wanted to hear a bit about was like the Welfare to Work program. Bill Clinton, President Clinton, before he signed the bill, he put in front and center an African-American woman who had a story about how her finding a job made her daughter proud of her. And then everyone forgot everything about her, and it then turned out that she later committed suicide because she was now working 2 jobs, and she was depressed, she couldn't afford medication, and she was caught in this welfare to work program that she just couldn't get out of, and this happened to more and more people. It's even been characterized by some people as a benign form of indentured servitude.
Mm-hmm.
So when we put in all of these safeguards to make sure that people don't cheat, we unintended, I'm going to be generous and assume that it's unintended, strip people of their dignity. So my question was, how do we make programs that help people with and balance it against people's fears of abuse, but saying that, but we're not going to go too far.
Sure. So when you look at it this way, in terms of this specific tax credit, it costs about $30,000 a year to incarcerate a person. So any amount less than that is a benefit. I mean, we can help reduce that expense, and then you're going to have a person who's going to be earning. And in my mind, what I want it to be is a family supporting wage. I'm not at, as far as we're concerned today, I don't have that number of what that wage rate would be. It surely would not be the minimum wage, that's for sure. So to answer the question in regards to is someone going to have to work 2 jobs, the idea of this tax credit isn't so that someone just gets a $725 an hour job. It's so they can get a job that pays them a family supporting wage where they would work 1 job, right? So that they could help build a career and, you know, and really get into a company. I mean, because this next person that gets into this program could be the next big thing, who's got the next great idea. We just needed some help along the way. But in addition to that, we're going to have to make sure that once I do win this seat and I'm able to bring this bill up, that I work with my counterparts so that we can address issues as they come up. But that's part of the problem that we've seen so far in our legislature, especially at the federal level. Something happens on one side, the opposite side doesn't want to do anything to help fix it. That can't keep happening. That stalemate is really, they do that kind of thing. It's like they're playing a game of chess with our lives, right? That's not acceptable. We need to make sure we have people in the positions of power to prevent those kinds of things from happening so that we can actually make progress, right? That's what we're here for. We want to make things better, make folks' lives better. But while they're playing games over there, people are struggling. And that there's no way you can be an honest person and say that that's acceptable.
Well, I can only agree with that. So would you support the Fight for 15 movement publicly? Or you equivocated a bit on a number as what the living wage should be, but would you support the Fight for 15?
And here's what I've said about that, and actually I do support that movement. I honestly do. I support the fact that they are fighting for something that they believe in, and who couldn't get behind that, right? That is I believe the essence of how this country came about to where it is now. But beyond that, I think if you look at Washington State, when I believe it's Seattle, where they passed their minimum wage increase, and I believe that is actually beyond 15 from what I remember. What they did is they brought key stakeholders together from the issue, whether it's the advocates, the small business community, civic leaders. They brought them all together and had a conversation. What is the best solution to do this? And they chose an incremental way of achieving that objective. And so I believe it is staged out over or phased in over a couple years that the rate will go up, but they have a plan to get there. That's the method that I support in getting there. I mean, as a president of a small business, I could not absorb a dramatic increase in what the cost for my employees' pay would be. Now, in my case, I don't pay anyone anywhere near the minimum wage, so that kind of thing wouldn't hurt. But when you're talking about increasing the pay of someone, I think if we don't include the people who are involved in that entire process, including the employers, you are risking having it unfoiled just a few years later. So if you look at how, you know, with the Affordable Care Act, people were running in 2012 as saying, hey, I'm running because I oppose the Affordable Care Act, right? And I'm going to go there to dismantle this thing. If we can't include people in this process, that will continue to happen. And I don't want to see that happen. So if we are fortunate to increase the minimum wage, and we are able to do so with getting buy-in from the small business, especially the small business community, we have a better chance of having something that is far more substantial than just having us just ram it down someone's throat and it doesn't go anywhere after that.
Okay. So we are running a little bit out of time. We have 4 minutes left, I'm being told. So I want to see if I can get you to tell me who would you support for the nomination of your party?
So I'm going to answer this question honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've been a lifelong Democrat, and I firmly believe that we have two of the most talented and skilled politicians running on the Democratic side right now. And it is, to me, it is rather inspiring to see the way that they're having a rather adult level conversation about real issues that matter to people like you and I, to regular people, compared to the clown show that you're saying on the right. And when you look at it from that comparison, I am more than happy. I'm thrilled that we get to choose one of the two of them, and I would be completely happy with whether it's Bernie Sanders or whether it's Secretary Hillary Clinton. I am okay with the both of them, because when you measure this of what we could get, if it's not one of them, that is not an America I am looking forward to living in. But even besides that, I think the way that the issues that they're talking about, the way that they're talking about them, is rather inspiring for younger folks like myself to find, how do I get into politics? Can I be inspiring, right? Can I talk to people in a way that's going to make them want to turn out in ways that they may not have done before? I live in Wisconsin's largest Republican district. How can I inspire people to want to do something where we've been told for so long that this district is so gerrymandered, it's so unwinnable, that why bother showing up? And what you're seeing now from both Secretary Clinton and Senator Sanders is a way to inspire people, and I appreciate that. I personally, I'm enjoying the way that they are doing things. I don't like the negativity thing. I don't really get into that. That's never been something I've appreciated. But I want to be inspired, and I want to be able to inspire people to vote for me too. Okay.
So you will not endorse any of them?
No. And the reason I'm not endorsing it is because I'm a fan of both of them, and at the same time, I have people in my district that support both Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. And what I think we need to look at, though, is while the presidential race at the national level is important, it's down-ticket races that are going to make the fundamental difference that will bring about the change that we are demanding. Again, we can't. It's not just going to be a president that's going to change these things, man. Whether it is a President Sanders or a President Clinton, these things that we are fighting for aren't going to happen simply because it's one of the two of them in there. If they don't have a Congress that's going to work with them, then it really doesn't matter. We're going to be back to square one where we are right now with a Republican-controlled House and Senate, and you can't have any progress. That's what we want, right? We're fighting for progress, and unless we make the effort to get folks like myself in the House and pick up some more seats and get folks like Senator Russ Feingold in the Senate, the kind of things we're going to fight for are going to be much more harder to achieve without us in there.
Okay. Khary Penebaker, thank you so much for joining us here on our first show, and thank you so much for your candor and your direct approach to these topics and issues. I hope you've enjoyed your interview here.
Yeah, so people can check out our website at KharyForCongress.com. I mean, anybody can find me on Twitter because I tweet so much. So my personal account is just at Khary P. My campaign Twitter account is at Khary, the number 4 Congress. We have a Facebook page. I'm very active in social media. I don't really shy away from questions. I'm pretty open with how I deal with things. As you can see here, I'm an honest guy. I just literally want to make a difference. And as much as I want to get money out of politics, we still need money, man. We have to raise as much money as we can so we can put some things in place so I can hire the right people, have the right kind of staff so that I can actually literally make history in this district.
Okay. That's how you get up with Khary. Otherwise, check out the chat on YouTube. There's his information has been posted there several times, or you can, when the video is uploaded, you'll be able to find contact information for Khary in our information section under the video. Khary, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll now be moving.
Thanks for having me tonight, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.